Jederson Menezes Alves was born on November 19, 1999 in the Brazilian state of Pará. He was the son of Silva Menezes and Batista Moreiro Alves. Details of his early life, as well as his teenage years, are unknown. Brazil, state of Pará. The air of Moreiro was still filled with the special magic of the December holidays. And the Christmas celebrations in 2019 and the arrival of the new year 2020 divided time into before and after for the young man. 2019 was behind us, and the celebrations were slowly coming to an end. The first days of January 2020, after a season of many gatherings and joys, gave way to a return to daily life. Moreiro is a municipality and city in the state of Pará, belonging to the metropolitan area of Belém. The municipality was founded in 1997. It has an area of just over 100 square kilometers and a population of about 90,000 people. This town has a very low economy and is almost dependent on local trade. Moreiro is more of a bedroom community for most people who work, study, and spend a large part of their activities in Belém. Jederson came to the city of Moreiro very recently in search of better opportunities. The guy started living with his uncle, Dewey Nelson, and it was during the December holidays that he met a young man with whom he developed a very close friendship. This fellow had an attractive appearance, could hold a conversation very well and intelligently, wrote Portuguese, was reliable, friendly, and seemed like a good person. But the truth is that this guy and Jederson were united by criminal activity, and they were hiding their darkest secrets. Some might argue that this handsome and good-looking young man had everything that his older friend couldn't. The fact is that Jederson did not feel able to attract a woman by classic, conventional methods, courtship, attention, and gifts, and therefore he suffered from an inferiority complex. According to experts, some people develop this condition because they are dissatisfied with their appearance or, for example, with a certain part of their body. They have some physical features that make these people feel insecure, even consider themselves inferior. For example, in skin colors, body mass, when they're very thin or facing obesity problems. Yes, this is another element that often influences these complexes. Being very short or too tall, having a certain size or shaped nose, and even dentures can also drive a person into an inferiority complex. This seemed to be the case with Jederson, who felt incapable of winning a woman and never stopped thinking for a moment about the perfect way to get the attention of one of the many girls he dreamed of during the December and New Year holidays. His thoughts on the matter had become very obsessive. He felt the need to attract and charm beautiful younger girls who would indulge his desire. He was willing to do anything and would accomplish his task in any case, especially if he had a companion. It was then that his new friend came on the scene. This handsome, talkative lad, who could certainly be the perfect bait. The two of them devised their sinister plan, taking into account the younger one's ability to communicate and his manner of polite expression, inspiring the confidence of the interlocutor. And this guy was to find potential victims. And to contact them, the two friends came up with an idea through a fake account in social networks. But as for the victims, they were going to look for girls who in their profile offered services or sale of goods related to aesthetic and cosmetic procedures. Obviously, the choice of this kind of female workers was related to two fundamental aspects. First, girls in this field are usually those who care about their appearance, cute, kind, but above all beautiful. Secondly, they are very familiar with social media and use it often. They promote their services or products, and through these channels they interact with their customers, manage their work schedule through the said platforms. Taking all these decisions as part of their murky strategy, the young men created a Facebook profile on behalf of a woman who required a particular service or some product offered by these girls. In early January, a Moreiro police station received a horrible complaint from a young woman who was a victim of violence. She was also severely beaten, and her belongings were stolen. The woman was contacted by those working in the field of feminine aesthetics through social media to utilize her services, but she was caught off guard by two young men who took advantage of her themselves. Unfortunately, in the midst of the horrific episode and in a state of panic, The victim failed to record any data that could have actually helped authorities catch these criminals. That day, both Jederson and his accomplice crossed the line and freed the hideous monsters they kept inside them. In just a few days after the first attack, Moreiro authorities recorded another similar case. Although they had very little information, it struck them that the modus operandi was exactly the same as in the first case. This victim was also contacted via social media to hire her for cosmetic services. Deceived, they took her to a secluded location where two men abused and robbed her. Therefore, the authorities started working on two fronts. On the one hand, they introduced research work, and on the other hand, they took preventive measures by warning the public about scammers on social media. As is often the case with these types of criminals, who are not caught and feel impunity, the violence and brutality of their actions began to increase. On Thursday, January 9th, 2020, Jederson and his accomplice revealed themselves again via social media. The guy contacted Samara Edgeworthy, a young woman who offered her services as a hairdresser. The girl received several messages from the alleged woman who needed her hair done. They made an appointment for the next day. In advance, the client informed her that her nephew would meet the girl at the bus stop, and it was he who would take her home. Samara found nothing suspicious to her. It was just another customer. There was no indication that would allow her to conclude that it was a young man and not a woman behind the messages. Besides, the treatment was very cordial and respectful. Judging by the fake profile with a female name, the customer was a friendly person. It should be noted that Jederson's accomplice managed to easily gain the trust of his victims. He usually told them on behalf of the customer that she was attracted by very good recommendations and reviews of their work. The next day, January 10th, 2020, as agreed, Samara arrived at the scene, got off the bus, and waited at the bus stop for her client's nephew. A young man of pleasant appearance arrived on a red bicycle that Jederson had loaned him. He approached Samara and asked her to sit in the back, assuring her that the ride was not far and it would be faster that way. Confident, Samara agreed, and together they traveled about 10 kilometers to Jederson's house. From that point on, they were captured by a local CCTV camera. As it turned out, they reached the house, and it was here that the two young men told Samara that she should give them all her belongings. And it was then that she learned that she had been the victim of a terrible deception and was in real danger. Samara tried to run away from her attackers, but the two men managed to catch her. And after dragging her away to a more inconspicuous wooded area, they began to beat this poor woman. Samara struggled as hard as she could, as she knew full well that her life was in danger. She could no longer escape, nor could she stand up to the two subjects. One of them, who was smaller and who met at the bus stop, held the woman by her arms from the front, while the other, with one arm around her neck, struck her from behind. When Samara was already in an unconscious state, Jederson took advantage of her. The two accomplices not only stole the money she was carrying, her cell phone, equipment, and work materials from her, but ultimately killed her. After committing the crime, Jederson and his friend picked up the young woman's body, carried it to a nearby abandoned vacant lot, and dumped it there. The adrenaline of the newly converted killers skyrocketed, and they were far from stopping. On the contrary, that same afternoon, January 10th, they contacted Jennifer Karen, applying the same modus operandi, the same fake profile. Jennifer offered her services as a manicurist, and the supposed client scheduled an appointment for her the next day, Saturday, January 11th. This time, the girl explained that she had to wait for the client's husband at a bus stop on a rural highway. For Jennifer, there was nothing suspicious about this order either, but something was still bothering her, so she decided to ask her sister Jessica Christina to accompany her. As agreed upon the day before, both girls arrived at the bus stop that Saturday by the agreed-upon time. Again, a reliable and outwardly normal-looking guy arrived on a red bicycle. He was surprised to see the two girls, but quickly got over the situation. The sisters wanted to take a motorcycle cab, but the guy said it wasn't necessary and offered to take Jennifer first, and while he was doing the work, he would come back for Jessica. Jennifer agreed to go first. She got on a bike rack, and the guy took her to a secluded corner with lots of trees and greenery, and that's where Jederson was hiding. When the girl and the young man pulled up, the second guy came out, and it turned out that the two guys were in on it. They told Jennifer that she had a hand over all the money, bank cards, all the belongings and tools she had with her. Fearing for her life, she began to resist, and Jessica, who was waiting at the bus stop, began to get a little nervous. The young man was taking too long, but she decided to wait anyway. Meanwhile, the trees and greenery hid the terror Jennifer was feeling. Jederson and his accomplice had brutally beaten the girl, abused her, and then strangled her. A few minutes later, a young man driving a bicycle returned to the bus stop with a most cold-blooded appearance, which calmed Jessica somewhat. When asked about Jennifer, the guy replied that she had started work and that was probably why she wasn't answering her cell phone. Putting the girl on the trunk, they both took a leisurely bike ride until they entered a wooded area. There the guys immediately attacked Jessica, stealing all her money, her cell phone. They also beat her, performed acts of intimacy, and attempted to strangle her. In a terrible struggle, Jessica managed to defeat the attacking young man, who was smaller in build than the second one, and she was begging for strength to run. After many minutes of running through the woods, she had a moment of clarity. Panic over the nightmare she had just experienced was replaced by the certainty that her sister had suffered the same fate. As soon as Jessica was able to reach the Moreiro police station, she, still gripped by panic, told the officers everything that had just happened. She also gave them all the information she had about the attackers, their description, and a description of the bicycle the guy had arrived on. Fortunately, the girl guessed to include in her detailed story that it all started with messages via Facebook. The information provided allowed officers to refine the investigation they had begun. They finally stopped the whereabouts of the young man, and at dusk on Sunday, January 12th, they drove to his home and arrested him there. At the scene, the officers found some of the victims' clothes and some of their belongings, including finding the cell phones of several girls. Seeing that the evidence exposed him, the young boy did not get tricky and answered all the questions of the police officers who questioned him. He not only confessed to his crimes, but also accused his accomplice Jederson. By the way, as you may have noticed, the name of the second young boy has not been released. Security officers then surveyed the area of the attack, which was not far from the residence at which they appeared to make the arrest. As unusual as it may seem, they found Jennifer, and the girl was still alive. She was immediately taken to a central hospital in a neighboring town. Subsequently, investigations and evidence searches were launched in the area to reconstruct the gruesome chain of facts and gather all possible evidence. While all of this was going on, Jennifer was between life and death in the hospital. Medical professionals determined that she had suffered very serious head injuries and decided to put the victim into an induced sleep state while hooking her up to a ventilator. Doctors wanted to achieve, through this treatment, a gradual improvement in the girl's vital signs and at the same time reduce the brain swelling resulting from her injuries. On Monday, January 13th, officers were able to capture Jederson Alves, but no evidence was found at the scene or elsewhere of the red bicycle ridden by his accomplice. Nor was there any evidence at Alves' home, which is why Jederson held so confidently, denying not only his involvement in the events, but saying he didn't know the guy arrested earlier. The media rushed to report the details of the attack and published everything related to the case of the maniac Moreiro, as he was publicly dubbed. However, in the case of the accomplice, according to Brazilian law, neither the authorities nor the media could disseminate absolutely no information, since it was a minor and his name did not appear anywhere. In several statements given to the media, Civil Police Chief Alberto explained that the Moreiro maniac, together with his accomplice, created a fake profile where he pretended to be a woman. He emphasized that all the victims were contacted through a social network and carefully selected one or two women according to their desires. The police chief also detailed the various arguments that the criminals used to deceive the women. According to the investigation, the directing was very complicated. The accomplices would arrange a meeting place, and from there, Junior would take it upon himself to drive them to where Jederson was. There was even a case where he posed as a reliable motorcycle cab driver to find one of the girls. The strategy of spreading the details had yielded results the police chief had not expected. Meanwhile, Jennifer was still in the hospital fighting for her life. Her relatives were desperate and outraged, praying and demanding justice. Eventually, after 11 days in a coma, the girl passed away on January 22, 2020, becoming the second fatal victim. 9 months later, the trial against Jederson, who had just turned 21, began. In the case of his accomplice, because he was a juvenile, authorities were required to conduct all prosecutions in strict confidence. In both cases, the strength of the evidence and the testimony against each was beyond doubt. While authorities and the media spoke of at least 10 victims of the criminal conspiracy, the maniac Moreiro and his accomplice were tried only for the brutal assault, as well as the violence, robbery, and murder committed against Samara and Jennifer, and the assault, theft, violence, and attempted murders against Jessica and Jennifer's sister. Jederson was additionally charged with corrupting his accomplice, whom he allegedly influenced to commit all of these crimes. The defense attorney did everything in his power during the trial to mitigate Jederson's actions, but the strength of the evidence and the brutality of his actions mattered more. Finally, the sentence was handed down on Monday, November 9, 2020. Jederson Menezes Alves was sentenced to 30 years, 9 months, and 5 days in closed prison and fined a large sum of money. Although his lawyer tried to get the sentence commuted, all motions were rejected. As for the young accomplice, in June 2020, he was sentenced to hospitalization and social educational measures. He was sent to a special assistance unit in Brazil. According to police, the young boy had previously been detained for 12 days at the Parasocial and Educational Services Foundation on a charge of stealing a bicycle before committing the offenses with Jederson. As soon as he was released, he began committing robberies and burglaries until he was brought together by a common interest with Alves, at which point this young, good-looking, shallow guy turned to murder. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women is a victim of some form of violence. Ironically, it was in the same state of Para that the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention of Punishment and Eradication of Violence Against Women was adopted in 1994. Prevention and caution are vital as society moves forward in an attempt to achieve the ideals set forth in the Convention, which states that every woman has the right to a life free of violence, both in public and private life. For now, Moreiro is safer, while 2 subjects remain behind bars who committed a series of crimes against women who make their living from beauty services and who relied on a fake female profile on social media. Thanks for watching. I recommend checking out other true crime stories. Click right now, and don't forget to activate your bell so you don't miss new stories. See you soon. Take care.